So, good evening, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to tonight's event, which is hosted by the Oxford Centre for Life Writing. My name's Kate Kennedy, and I'm the director of the centre. And for those of you who are new to us, OCLU, as we abbreviate ourselves, is a world-leading centre in life writing, bringing together authors, scholars and readers to explore and discuss and write. And we have a wealth of events and opportunities this term, including lectures and seminars with writers such as Jackie Kay, Amy Tan, Chloe Dalton, as well as today's very wonderful speaker, who my colleague, also the director, Elleke Boehmer, will introduce in a moment. And this year, in fact, marks the Life Writing Centre's 15th anniversary, and none of what we do would be possible without the generosity of our donors. So I want to tell you a little bit about a specific programme of ours that we are fundraising for tonight, because this event forms part of our Global Majority and Underrepresented Writers programme. And the programme offers scholarships to brilliant unpublished writers from around the world. We provide them with teaching, mentorship and practical guidance, and try and give them the skills they might need to hone their craft and to get their writing published. And the programme also creates opportunities for leading global majority and underrepresented life writers, like tonight's speaker, to discuss their work. And at present, the programme is entirely unfunded, and as part of our anniversary celebrations, we're asking for your support to help secure its future. We've had a fantastic pilot year. We're hoping that we will, if we build it, they will come, is the principle. So we've built it, we've run it for a year, and we really now need people's support to make sure that we can keep offering this opportunity to other writers. And you can donate to our anniversary appeal via our website, and the link should hopefully have been posted in the chat. But if you'd like to discuss other ways of supporting us, we always warmly welcome emails, conversation, in person, online, whatever suits you. And just a final note from me regarding the Q&A tonight. The OCLU team will be collecting questions for Kit throughout the event, and you can submit yours via the Slido link in the chat. So I will hand over to my fantastic colleague Elleke Boehmer to tell you more about our speaker, about herself and about today's talk. Thank you, Kit and Elleke, very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Kate, for that introduction, and what a privilege it is for both Kate and I to direct OCLU, the Oxford Centre for Life Writing, in our different capacities. It's my very, very great pleasure this evening to be in conversation here as part of this Global Majority and Underrepresented Writers series with the fabulous writer, award-winning writer, Kit de Waal. She is the author of My Name is Leon, 2016, and the recent The Best of Everything, 2025, among other books that I'll say a bit more about in a moment. But just to give you the shape of the time we're going to spend together, Kit and I are going to explore through the lens of her work, in particular the recent The Best of Everything. We're going to explore how ordinary lives can illuminate the extraordinary about human life, and also what writing has to say to the big questions which Kit de Waal's work repeatedly confronts. What it is to love each other, what it is to be in connection with, but also in disconnection from one another. And the bonds that link people. And I think one of the aspects that her work is so brilliant in exploring is the bond between adults and children, and between parents of different kinds, and not only their children but children. So just a few more introductory words about Kit. She was born in Birmingham of an Irish mum who was a foster carer, which I think is important in understanding. Actually, both of the novels that I have already mentioned, an Irish mum and a Caribbean dad. My Name is Leon was Kit's debut novel, and it explored the nature of family and community and the private hopes and dreams that we all grapple with. And it was recently adapted. Some of you may have noticed that already, as a film for BBC Two. Before she became a full-time writer, Kit worked for 15 years in criminal and family law. She was a magistrate, and she has also sat on adoption panels. I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about that in our conversation. Since My Name is Leon, so since 2016, Kit has gone on to write a number of other works, including a memoir, Without Warning and Only Sometimes. It's right here on the pile to my left, which was shortlisted for the Irish Biography of the Year, and also a short story collection, Supporting Cast. These works, from their different perspectives, all ponder questions of race, of belonging, of motherhood, familyhood, of loss, and of recovery. And I mean, I seriously can't think of a more exciting writer to be talking to at the Oxford Centre for Life Writing Online than Kit de Waal. Kit, you're very, very welcome. I'm really, really happy to be in discussion with you.
Thank you so much. It's cringeable listening to all those lovely things. I mean, it's lovely, but it's also like, oh. But thank you for that great introduction.
Well, you have done all of those things, according to my research. But just to warm us up, I wondered if I could invite you to read a passage from The Best of Everything, which I'm holding up here, if Zoom will allow me. I wonder if you could read. It's The Best of Everything, I should say, and I don't want to give too many spoilers. But it's the story of Paulette and her hungry heart, shall we say?
Yes.
And I wondered if I could ask you just to read from pages 66 to 67 when she has a crucial encounter.
Yeah. So just to put some context into this, Paulette, who is a woman that came over from the Caribbean, and she has an encounter with a man that she finds very, very difficult. She's only met him once before, and those circumstances were not great. This is the second time she meets him. She's just by the gate to the road, 5 minutes from home, when she sees him. Shirt and tie man. He's wearing a jumper and a jacket and trousers that need ironing. He's walking slow, too slow for the weather. And beside him is the same little boy, bigger now, but that's the only good thing she can say about the child. Skinny. The child looks like he never had a good meal in his young life. He's wearing a wool jumper right next to his young skin, a wet jumper, 2 sizes too big. And the boy is wearing a hat that looks like it came clear from the First World War, green canvas with flaps on his ears and a tie under his chin, and some skimpy looking canvas shoes, short trousers. His legs and feet are soaking wet. Shirt and tie sees her. He stops like he's been shot and raises his hand, points at her. And Paulette stops too. She feels the same old rage beating the hammer of her heart. What? She says. What? Paulette knows the face of someone who's been too long crying or not sleeping or both. Shirt and tie moves forward, both arms raised now, like he's going to grab her up or, God have mercy, embrace her. The man has clean lost his mind. That's what's happening here. Paulette steps backwards and the man moves in closer. She can smell his unwashed self. What do you think you're doing? You're fucking mad, she says. And the minute the words are out of her mouth, she remembers the boy. Paulette looks down at the child. His nose is running, pale green on his see-through white skin. You've got a boy, says the man. I've seen you. You've got a boy like him. And what? She says. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore, he whispers. And he pushes the boy forward, nudging him towards her. Please, he says, take him.
Thank you very much, Kit, for that reading. I'm sure it has raised all kinds of questions and actually anxieties in listeners' minds. I mean, I think that's one of the beauties of this writing. It's very immersive. We're right inside it. And I was saying a little earlier, just before we began this bit of our conversation, that I was crying by the end of The Best Is Everything. I even just sort of tear up thinking it's so incredibly moving and immersive. But I think we'll get there. Just to get us started. Maybe this is too large a question, but it is the question that that we kind of opened up with, which is this kind of interplay of the ordinary and the extraordinary.
Yes.
That I think your work explores. It's a kind of double-edged thing, because there we have what is on the surface an ordinary encounter between two adults and a child in a park, and then the extraordinary starts kind of popping out at us. So I just wondered if you had reflections on that.
I'm endlessly fascinated by the ordinary. I mean, I don't actually believe in the ordinary. I think everybody's extraordinary. Everybody has a secret. Everyone has experienced shame and envy and a broken heart. There's something just out of reach for most people, something they wish they did, some words they wish they said. And that's extraordinary. I mean, that is what makes the world go round, the interplay between people, much more so than events, because events only happen because of people and people's decisions. So it endlessly fascinates me how, we all keep going in the face of difficulties. I don't think anybody, you can be as rich as you like, you can be as privileged as you like, nobody waltzes through life. There's always some shit. There's always some loss. There's always something going on. And that interests me. What interests me a lot is that there are big world events that turn everybody to look at them. Let's take the royal wedding, say, or let's take 9/11, some terrible tragedy. Let's take the big events. On the days of those big events, that was somebody's birthday. It was the day someone got married. It was the day somebody lost their mother. It was the day someone had their heart broken. And we all seem to look at the big events and we're fascinated by them, and they're endlessly reported, and that's what's happening. And if you say 9/11 to someone, they go, oh, 9/11. And that day has been hijacked. It's forever going to be that. It won't be a wedding day. It wasn't the day that you had your much longed for baby. It won't be the day you held your mother's hand and kissed her goodbye for the last time. And it's as though we are robbed sometimes of the big events in our lives because the world tells us to look somewhere else. And that's really fascinates me, that we have these private tragedies and celebrations that maybe don't get the attention they deserve because of something else going on. So on that level, I don't believe in the ordinary. But if there is the ordinary, oh my goodness, it's endlessly fascinating. I mean, endlessly. I remember going to do a talk many years ago, and there were about 10 very old people, old ladies there. It was a talk in a library. No one knew who I was. And these people came, whoever turned up. So they just turned up with their sandwiches and their flasks to listen to whoever it was, and it was me. And afterwards, this woman came up to me and said, I've always wanted to write my story, my memoir. And I said, oh, that's lovely. I said, why don't you do it? And she said, oh, I'm too old now. She was about 80. And I said, well, what would you say? And she said, my grandmother was the local, she was called, she wrapped people and she tended the dead. And in those days, before you went to the undertakers, you went to this woman. She'd been knocked up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she went, and she was the woman for the area that tended the dead, that wrapped the dead, that washed the dead, the layer out, she was called. And she had, and this woman has this wonderful story, and her name was Queenie, and I thought, you were made to be a writer. And I just thought, wow. And I said, please write that story down. That's gone now. That woman's probably dead. That story's gone. That is an ordinary woman in a suburb of Birmingham with this magnificent story and the things that she saw in the 1920s. And it's gone. And that's an ordinary life, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reminded as you were speaking there of one of my nieces who was due to give birth last September, and it had to be by kind of scheduled cesarean section, and she was given the choice of the 11th of September, and she freaked out.
Absolutely.
And so she chose the day just before.
Yes.
So that's that kind of, it's that, how the ordinary is the flip side of the extraordinary.
Yes.
Which kind of, and you telling us about Queenie, the layer out, who had the relative who was the local layer out of the dead, kind of brings us by a more or less direct route to this huge question, which I'm sure you must confront as both a novelist and a memoirist, Kit, all the time, which is, and I'm sure we can spend with the rest of the time talking about this, which is, which medium for you is more kind of malleable for, writing the ordinary that is extraordinary? Because,
yes.
I mean, yes, when we delve, the ordinary does become wonderful and extraordinary. But then there are lives, including our own lives, of course, that we find particularly interesting. And you have in your wonderful Without Warning and Only Sometimes written about your extraordinary family. So I was just wondering if you had some reflections on kind of life writing as against fiction writing, which is also, is of course, a kind of life writing.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, life writing is, of course, a kind of fiction. We go back, when I was writing my memoir, I would go back and remember events where let's say I'm 6 and 7 and my father's friends have come to visit, and this was a very big production in our house. And of course, what I can remember is not people walking in and what they said and what my dad was wearing and the nuts that were on the table. I'm recreating that. I have my memories. I'm colouring in. My memories is a sketch. And in writing about it, you have to colour in. You have to, what's the room like? What's the smell like? What do the people smell like? Those smells have gone. I am recreating events, and I'm also choosing the events that I talk about. And so I would write about this event, and it would be juxtaposed to that event for dramatic purposes, because of course, everybody's life is pretty boring, really. There's days of boring. When you write your memoir, you leave the days of boring out. And you leave out, I got up in the morning, I brushed my teeth, I had a cup of tea, put the kettle on, I did that, I made some toast. You don't write that. You choose, you cherry pick the moments from your life, and you not embellish them, but you colour them in, you bring them alive. And that's exactly the same skill that you need for fiction writing. The difference with fiction writing is you are actually inventing the events. You are not inventing, well, you might invent events that you can't remember. If you think about Frank McCourt, for example, when he wrote Angela's Ashes, well, he wrote about, I was born in a room and blah, 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 blah. And my father said to my mother when I was born, blah, blah, blah. And then we did this. He's 3. Of course, he's not remembering what his parents said at 3, but he knows it would have been something like this. So he's recreating events that he absolutely could not remember or absolutely could not know. And those skills are identical to the ones you need to be a good fiction writer. And of course, a fiction writer, when we are writing fiction, we do not want to have readers sitting outside of the story going, oh, well, of course, this is all made up. Because you would not get someone to cry on the last page. Why would you cry? It's nonsense. You cry because it's real, because you are there, you're immersed, and you know this could have happened or this did happen. Because fiction is saying to people, this, oh, look at this, look what's happening to this poor boy. There is no poor boy. The poor boy's words on a page, but you believe it. And if you've done your job well as a novelist, those people are real. And certainly, even as the novelist, those people are real. If they're not real to me, I certainly cannot bring them alive for the reader, for people I've never met. The same with my father. I have to make him a real person so that when he does something, people get it. And the only way I can make him a real person is to draw him and to illustrate him and to put him in these scenes that show what he was like and to partially be inside of him with his history and his hunger and who he was. So both mediums are very, very good for talking about the ordinary. When I was writing my memoir, particularly, I wrote at the beginning, I wrote a list of maybe 40 scenes from my childhood. And then I had to look back and think, okay, well, I don't need that and I don't need that. And you start to assemble from these 100 scenes for 20 that are going to illustrate who you are and the story you want to tell. Well, on another day, or my sister would choose a different 20 to tell another narrative, a different narrative of exactly the same events. I'm going to choose this and I'm going to illustrate that aspect and you're going to illustrate that. And there are so many different ways to tell a life, so many different. I've told one of maybe 10 versions of my childhood.
Yeah, I mean, so much to respond there. But one thing I was thinking, which I just found admirable, both in Leon, My Name is Leon, and in The Best of Everything, is how well you were writing, which is different in memoir, I think, how well you are writing kind of repetitive acts. I mean, so that we felt the stoniness of the stone, or the kind of the stickiness of the, the sweets that Leon was kind of storing up and eating. And I just wondered if you had any reflections on that, that, I mean, a very good example is Paulette cooking. She just has this skill of kind of creating kind of just flavorsome comfort food for those she loves.
Yes.
And when, I mean, I just found myself dwelling on every single word and line, because it is, yes. I was wondering if you had any kind of tricks to share about that very, very detailed. I mean, it wasn't boring, it was actually the opposite, but very immersive. But fiction kind of allows us to do something of that, doesn't it?
It does. And also, whatever it is, I mean, in this instance, this character's interested in food. I wrote a different book where a character was interested in fabric and making clothes. And you absolutely have to, and any novelist that's in the room at the moment will know that you end up going, oh, you start moving, like, how do you chop an onion? And you're sitting there, and if you're in a cafe, it's a problem because you look mad. But you're doing these actions because you absolutely have to believe that the character cares about this. Cooking is not one of my preoccupations, neither is dressmaking. And I also wrote a story about a tailor, and you have to, you use it to illustrate something about the character, whatever that thing is. For Paulette, she's not an intellectual, she's not a reader, she's someone who absolutely knows that her worth and her love is demonstrated through caring. The caring that is physical caring, looking after somebody, but also through food. And so it's important to her. And so because it's important to her, she's not going to find it repetitive at all. This is going to be, oh, I'll make that with that, or shall I do that with that? Oh, no, I'll do that. And when you really love something and when it's the means by which you communicate to someone, it will never be boring to Paulette. If it's never boring to Paulette, you cannot have your reader think it's boring. So you absolutely have to immerse yourself as a writer in that thing until you find it interesting. I mean, I had to ask my sister about the recipes, and I wrote them initially, and I'd say, oh, she does this with the lamb and she does that. And I sent it to my sister and she said, you're absolutely rubbish. Don't write them. I'll write the recipes. You write it down. And so I had to read the recipe and say, right, what's another word for chop, and how would she think of it, and how much is she spending? All the things that fascinate her. So because it's important to her, then I think you buy it as a reader. If it's not really important to her, it will feel like an add-on. If it's not, and if the writer doesn't believe it, that's the main thing. The writer has to believe it and invest in that thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, another example is Leon growing plants, isn't it? And
Yes.
kind of pressing the seeds into the ground. And actually, that's something that, because he's learning, and we kind of almost follow him through his process of learning.
Yes.
You know, when Tufty shows him, and then Mr. Devlin shows him, you know, another version of that, and he steadily kind of builds
Yes.
those skills and capacities. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
and I absolutely love gardening. So that was
ah,
genuine. That was, I mean, when I first wrote the book, I called it The Scarlet Emperor after the runner beans.
hmm.
Anyway, Penguin thought that was an absolutely rubbish title, so they changed it. And I think they were right to My Name is Leon. But I think I wrote maybe far too many chapters about gardening to begin with, and I had to wind back on them because I was utterly fascinated in that.
But another very visceral thing, which really struck me, was smells. You know,
Yes,
for example, because um, Leon is in foster care, and he keeps being, pulled into these both welcome and unwelcome hugs with with
yes,
older ladies,
yes.
and he's always very aware of their kind of their tangible, olfactory quality.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the
Yeah.
way that you do when you're a child, I can remember one uncle, and I just didn't like the smell of him. I don't even know what it was to this day, but I'd sit on Uncle Mike's lap and I'd be like, oh, I don't know, something. When you've got no other words and you can't articulate very well what you don't like about someone.
Yeah, I think that's what you capture so beautifully there, the far seeingness and kind of far-sightedness of of children. So we've been talking a bit about, this visceral quality, and you've been telling us about your sister. She's already appeared twice. And when we're talking life writing, we're drawing on memory, as we've been saying, and that's why we call our own, life writing memoir. Are there particular kind of triggers to memory that you have used, Kit? And does it differ between the different kinds of writing, kind of fiction, non-fiction?
Certainly, when I was writing my memoir, and all of this have done this. If someone said, what was it like when you were growing up? Over the years, if you're a certain age, you've honed your anecdotes. They're dinner party anecdotes. You know them. You know where the laughs are. You know where the pathos is. And you say, oh, blah, 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 blah. And you've got one or two little jokey things or traumatic stories, and you've honed it over the years, and you know it really well. And then there's the truth. And the truth is not the well-honed anecdote for the dinner party. The truth is either darker or richer or longer or more traumatic, or it didn't actually happen like that. It didn't happen on the same day, but I've said it happened on the same day because it's a better joke or whatever. What I had to do when I was writing down, so there's a scene in my memoir where I nearly bite off my tongue and it's hanging on by a little thread, and it's as it appears in the book. But I had honed this story that I nearly bit my tongue off for effect, down to like 3 sentences. Bought my and it's shock value. And then people, oh, what happened? And chat about it. Well, when I came to actually write it, I was thinking, what was I doing? Where was I? How old was I? Where was mum? Why was I on my own? And you have to actually come into the room and not stand outside of the room and think, I'll say it like this, be in the room. What size is it? What time of the day is it? Where's my dad? Where's my mom? What am I doing? How long did it take there? How did I get to the hospital? Go all through that reality rather than the throwaway lines that we've had. And I was really shocked at how much I'd shaved off this story for the anecdote. And in the telling of the truth of the story, it was not funny. I'd made this into quite a funny story. Oh, you bit your tongue off, great. And actually, it was terrible, and it was terrifying, and it was shocking to everybody. And then I could inhabit it and I could write about it. But it's exactly the same when you're writing fiction. Be in the room. Don't stand outside of the room. Be with the person undergoing the thing. So are they scared? Be scared. Feel that visceral fear. And where am I feeling it in my chest? Oh, what do you want to? I want to run away. What time is it? And where's the light coming into the room? And who else is there? And the more that you can immerse yourself in the scene, be in the room, be in the coat, be wearing the uncomfortable shoes, the better your writing will be. You don't have to write it down, but you do have to inhabit it and not be afraid of the event. The closer you get to the event in reality, the better you'll be able to articulate it.
You also use dreams very evocatively to take us back into memory, into the character's memory, and also into their longing. I mean, Paulette has these strong longings and very vivid dreams of St. Kitts, which, you know, is a kind of a place of refuge for her in her dreams, but also in her memory.
Yes.
And I was wondering how that worked for you, given that your family is in part from St. Kitts, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. I think it was important for Paulette to have longings and have memories of better times, that were where she was safe, where she was amongst her own people, as she says many times, where she was deeply loved. And for her to access those places and those times when she felt very unstable, when she was longing for someone to go to and say, tell me what to do. This thing goes wrong in her life, and she wants her grandmother at this point. It's because her mother, she says, my grandmother would tell me off for being so stupid, but she would love me. And so the dreams of those lovely times serve as a sort of balm for her, because she can't go there. There's no one there left in the West Indies. She can't go back in time. All she can do is access it through this sort of semi-conscious way of having it all over again, being in this lovely place. And certainly for me, when I go back to my childhood, there is definitely a dreamlike quality. And when I was at school, I was called Dreamo by my teacher, because my favorite thing in the world still is daydreaming. I absolutely love it. Sometimes I think, oh, if I won the lottery, what would I do? Now, most people say I'll buy a house or go on holiday. Oh no, I get out pen and paper, and I'm there in Bali, and I've got that, and I'm there. You know, I'm not sort of thinking, oh, I'll do this. I've gone. You know, it's almost like I've had it. It's fantastic. And maybe that's one of the prerequisites for being a novelist, to fantasize and to be somewhere else, be someone else. It's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I think you've given us a key there to your craft, your abilities
Yes.
as a daydreamer.
Daydreamer.
Yeah, and I mean, I was struck by the fact that both Leon, My Name is Leon, and The Best of Everything take us right back to kind of the 1980s and the 90s, you know, before we had phones and all of that kind of dreaming by proxy that
Yes.
that the mobile phone gives us. And I wondered if that was deliberate or just the, those, I mean, the Charles and Diana wedding is very prominent in My Name is Leon. And we're kind of right there, right there
Yeah.
in that I think it was 1981, wasn't it? Right there at the start of
Yes.
the 1980s. And there's we're made aware that Mrs. Thatcher is the is the prime minister. So I wondered, to what extent that was deliberate or partly the stuff of dreaming again.
Oh, it's most definitely deliberate. Certainly for a 9-year-old boy today, he would not be
Yeah.
out on his bike. No chance. He'd play PlayStation. If Leon was ever going to leave the house, he most definitely did not have access to either 24-hour telly, which they didn't have in the 80s, or a mobile phone, or video games. In fact, when I was writing the book, there's a scene where Maureen says to Leon, turn the telly off. And at first I wrote, he picked up the remote control and turned the telly off. No, he didn't in 1981. There was no remote control. You got up, and if you wanted it louder, you turned it loud, or you turned it off, or you turned it over. It was get up and go to the telly times. That's how long ago it was. And for Leon to have any adventures, they could not be digital. These were going to be, I need to leave the house, meet people, potentially get into danger, potentially have relationships no one knows about that might be good, might be bad. And it was absolutely deliberate, because a bike is not exciting at 9 anymore. Not when you can be shooting Martians or, GTA or Call of Duty or whatever it is. You absolutely don't need to leave the house to have an adventure. And I wanted Leon to be out in the world, experiencing things and feeling free. I mean, he did feel free. And I think for me personally, it's a loss for children to not have that time. I think the internet is utterly fantastic. Thank God for it. But the bad side of it is that I think children's childhood is curtailed by it and over-informed by things they don't need to know about. So I think Leon had a childhood, fortunately. And certainly with Paulette setting that in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was the same. I wanted her to have this experience of not having information, which she doesn't have a lot of the time. She can't find people. She can't look up how to get a new house or anything like that. She's got to go to the housing office. She's got to go to the supermarket. There's no groceries getting delivered. And it was a different world, absolutely different world. And perhaps when I stopped writing and the people writing, who are now 30, we won't be, well, we'll be reading about that like we read about Jane Eyre taking a candle up to bed. It'll be like, oh, no electricity. Correct. It's a gone world, I'm afraid.
I can't remember if it's The Best of Everything or My Name is Leon, but there is actually a scene where they go to acquire a remote control, and the magic of the remote
Yes.
control. It made me very nostalgic actually for the
Yes.
the 1980s and the 90s.
Absolutely.
We had these tangible kind of visceral things.
Yes.
So yeah, it would be a very, very different kind of writing, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
That harks back to now from say 2050, and a different kind of memory, because I think that the tissue of our memory is now is kind of interwoven with what we see on our screens. So just kind of turning a little, Kit, because we are part of the this conversation is part of the Global Majority and Underrepresented Writers program. I was really interested in, and there's so much to say about this, really interested in how you write race.
Mhm.
It is, and I mean, it's absolutely central. The divisiveness of racism and racially informed decisions in foster care is absolutely central to My Name is Leon. Leon is aware that his brother's been taken from him for a certain reason, but he obviously can't fully understand that. And Paulette, of course, too, is is black and 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 feels that very much with shirt and tie, and
Yes.
she feels race and she feels class there. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I was very curious about your thoughts in that regard, as a writer and as a memoirist.
Um, So I can remember when I was maybe 5, the first time I became aware that I was black. I didn't know I was black. I didn't know I was anything. I mean, I was brought up by a white mother and a black father, and that was my norm. And I wasn't aware that I was black until I went to school and got called certain names. And I was like, I mean, I was baffled. I was baffled by it. I was just like, oh, that's I never thought it was me. I thought it was them. Fortunately, I never internalized it. Um, but for me, and I think looking from the outside, we looked and we were extremely unusual. I'm talking about in the very early 60s. We were a very unusual family. Mixed race families, black families were rare, mixed race families were much more rare. And it was, though, my norm. I believed I was Irish completely. I was an Irish child that happened to be black. I believed I was a West Indian child that happened to be Irish. They absolutely coexisted with no issue. There was no friction. It was just who I was. It was normal. Um, and yet, I remember the older I got that I was forced to confront what racism was because it was brought to me. Um, I had anti-Irish racism, obviously, because of what the IRA were doing in the 70s. And so, obviously, if any Irish people are doing something bad, all Irish people are bad, very similar to Islam today. Gets blamed for everything that happens. All Muslims are bad because some Muslims are doing things we don't like. Exactly the same in the 80s riots with black people, seemingly black people rioting. Therefore, all black men are bad and blah, 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 blah. I've got 2 black brothers. So I found myself having to deal with race when I didn't want to deal with race. I did not ever see myself as a freedom fighter or an activist for race. But there is no question that it will be brought to you, and you have to confront it and you have to learn about your stance of it. What do I think about that? Who am I? And now I describe myself, and I often am described as a black writer, which I am, of course. But I am, if we're talking percentages, about 34% black. The rest of me is white, but I'm a black writer because that's what you see. And because I have an identity as a black writer, I am in Ireland an Irish writer. I am about 44% Irish. So I'm an Irish writer, and you have to learn to live with these seeming contradictions. For me, it's a whole beautiful, wonderful existence and an identity to have. And you have to learn how to defend those identities and how to celebrate those identities and which identity to speak about in what context and what's the language and how do people see me and how do people experience what I'm experiencing. And I have the privilege, and it is a privilege, of being a half white writer, and that's different. And I'm a light-skinned writer because in this country and in all countries, there is colorism, and the blacker you are, the more likely you are to experience racism. And so I have this privilege of being the acceptable face of blackness very often, the acceptable face. It's the half white person, if you see the actors on television that make it, they're usually light-skinned, Meghan Markle style black people, less threatening. And you know that, and you deal with that, and you understand the entire landscape of racism and how to operate in it. When I write about it, then I have to remember, when I write about being black, I remember being white. I have to remember my whiteness, and I say, what are they seeing? What are the white people seeing in this situation? When they see Leon, what are they seeing? When they see Tufty at the allotments, what's the white eye seeing? And then when I'm the black person writing about race, I'm saying, what's the black person feeling in this scene? How are they behaving? What does Paulette think about shirt and tie? What's her misunderstandings of shirt and tie? And there will be misunderstandings. I had two parents that fought all the time, and part of that was about race and misunderstanding. So it's like juggling and calibrating all times the eye that's seeing, the eye that's describing, the eye that's suffering, the eye that's celebrating, the suspicious eye, the damaged history. And you have to very carefully write that down, because the minute you start saying racism is bad, you've lost it. You don't even go there. That's obvious. Everyone knows that. You have to write it so that people are living their real lives, their normal lives, and experiencing racism in this very normal landscape.
There's that interesting moment. I'm just kind of fastening onto the Irishness that you've been telling us about. There's that moment when Paulette and her neighbor, who is Irish, aren't getting on, and well, I mean, it's a slightly frictionful relationship.
Yes.
It goes from full on to coldness and back, and there's that moment when Paulette realizes that her neighbor is kind of rounding and shaping her spoken language to fit an
Yes.
English, a British or an English ear, and she, Paulette, when she came from St. Kitts, she herself was doing that
Yes.
there's that moment of kind of coming to, it's a really lovely moment. I can think of several others, but it's one that's very striking because it doesn't have to do with skin color alone in that situation. It has to do with voice. And
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. My mother, who obviously was Irish and had an Irish accent, she also had other accents, and we would cringe. Oh, the embarrassment! She would try and speak like an Irish lady, an English lady for the English, shopkeeper, and we would die with embarrassment. And my father had a couple of voices as well, and one of them was very clear and enunciated clearly, and we would just be so embarrassed by my immigrant parents trying their best to not be immigrants in this situation, to be decent and to be accepted and to not suffer racism. And look, I can be proper. And of course, we had, Brummie accents, so we were okay. And we used to hear the tripping up of my parents when they didn't get it right. And it was cringeable and sad that they had to do it at all. Why did they have to do it? They were Irish, they were West Indian. Celebrate that. People can understand you perfectly well, but it was the fear of the immigrant, of non-acceptance. And I can remember that very, very well.
And speaking of voice and speaking of accent, what I really enjoyed also in The Best of Everything is that way in which Paulette's kind of internal voice is in this kind of,
Yes.
kind of modified kind of
Yes.
St. Kitts. I mean, it's not patois, but she
Yes.
uses these locutions that are very distinctive, and so which is again very immersive because we're right there with her. We're
Yes.
hearing her internal monologue.
Yes, and her internal monologue would have had that phraseology. So I was asked this question by a student the other day, and they were saying, should I want to write a voice in dialect. I want to write a story in dialect. And I said, well, that can be very off-putting. I'm not saying don't do it, but there's ways of writing in dialect that give you the dialect, but it's English. And it's more about sentence structure and the words that you leave out and how you might add little words like man or just clearly or something that is a sort of word salad. And you're adding little things that normally you wouldn't add if it was just English. And by that, you're saying this woman has an accent without having to give any, without having to mess with any of the words. And it's a very useful tool for differentiating characters. So, for example, when I write about Shirt and Tie, and Shirt and Tie delivers her this story about his background, and it was lovely because I could write in proper English sentences that I couldn't do elsewhere in the book because this is Paulette's voice. It's certainly not my voice. And so she's speaking like that. And now Shirt and Tie in his beautiful modulated English is going to deliver this heartbreaking story. And I could write, I could use poetic language and perfect sentence structure. It was great.
Yeah, it is quite a moment where we finally get that
Yes.
that kind of received
Yes.
English voice coming through.
Yes.
We're moving towards the end of our conversation time, and we're going to open up soon for Q&A with everyone listening. But before we do that, as a kind of segue, I wonder, Kit, if I could ask you just to read one more passage. And I should say to everyone that Kit let me choose this passage. It is from those final incredible heartbreaking but transcendent also scenes of The Best Is Everything. So I wonder if you might read to us from 287 to 289, top of 2.
Yeah. Just to put some context in this, Paulette has been having a very bad time. She's been in bed for a few days and she's in bed upstairs and she's not in a good way. Then one day she hears something downstairs, metal on metal, a frying pan on the stove or a metal lid against a pot. She throws off the blankets and tries to stand, but her legs buckle. She grabs the handle of her bedroom door and creeps out onto the landing, leaning against the wall, gripping the banister. She stands still as a statue on the landing. She tiptoes to the window to see if Maggie's in the garden so she can call for help. No. She stays there for a few more seconds. Fish is what she can smell. Robbers don't make dinner. She creeps a little forward and peeks down the stairs. She takes each step quiet, heel to toe, and sidles into the kitchen and sees him there, long hair now, curling behind his ears, and a back so broad she wouldn't know him from behind. He turns and sees her. It's late, he says. When she looks further in, she sees the table laid for two, wine glasses, napkins, everything. She folds her arms over her chest. Look there, see your cardigan, Paulette? He says. She picks it up and slips her arms in as he pours orange juice into the wine glasses like it's champagne. Taste, he says. She takes a little sip and nods. He pours another 2 inches out and curls the carton right at the last moment so no drips spill. He's wearing a white shirt and black trousers. There's a crisp white cotton apron around his waist, tied behind with a bow. His face has no expression whatsoever, so Paulette says nothing. On 2 of her good plates, he puts a golden Johnny cake with saltfish, fried plantain chips, and a salad. As a last flourish, he sprinkles her food with parsley, bright green, chopped fine. The food is set out neat like a picture. Sit down, he says, and he sits opposite, beckoning her with his knife for her to start. While it's hot, he says.
Getting the beauty of it hot.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kit. It's an amazing scene. I hope everyone, goes on reading. So I'm quite technically challenged here, I should say, but I do see I've kind of opened the little app, so I do see a question, and please, everyone, this is your chance now to chip in with questions rising from the conversation or in response to Kit's work. So this is the question that I see. You beautifully describe how we need to feel with our characters. How do you stabilize yourself if the events your character feels are deeply traumatic? This is an amazing question, actually. It's yeah, it's a one I share.
It's particularly important when you're writing memoir, because it isn't fiction. It happened to you, and it can be very, very hard. And there's a scene there's a period in my life, I should say, of my teenage years where I was, let's say 10 minutes away from a breakdown. And I remember it very, very well. And it's still horrible to remember. But I knew I had to write about it in my memoir, and I knew that, and I was scared about going there. I remember how unstable I was and how vulnerable I was. And I remember ringing a friend of mine, Kathy Rensenbrink, who maybe some of you will know. She wrote a brilliant memoir called The Last Act of Love, where she had to turn off the life support machine of her brother. And the whole book was about that decision and coming to that decision absolutely brilliantly. And I rang her and I said, I don't know if I can write about this. And she said, you can write about it and you can leave it alone. Because the fear when you write about traumatic events is that they will overtake you and they will trip you up, and you can't leave them alone. You can leave them alone, and you need to believe you can leave them alone. You can go in there and it won't be nice, and it will sorry. It will destabilize you for a time, maybe a day, maybe a week. Certainly with life writing, if you're going to do justice to your story, then you need to access those feelings and you need to do it right. However, I would also say this: there are some things in our lives that we do not write about. Don't write about them. You don't, writing a memoir is not giving evidence in court. You don't need to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Unless it misleads, you do not need to, in your memoir, write every ugly, shaming, painful detail. You can summarize, you can skip. And there are some things in our lives that are worth more than £10.99, worth more than the price of a paperback. Don't write about them. And if it's going to damage you, don't write about that either. We have to make a decision as memoirists or as fiction writers about what we write about and take responsibility. So I've got a frog in my throat. Take responsibility for our own emotional and mental health. And if it's going to damage you, I would say don't do it. And I'm teaching a memoir class at the moment, and somebody sent me an email and said, this is really traumatic. And I said, don't do it. I either do a version that you can live with and a version that you can access safely, but I would question why you wanted to go to this terrible place all over again. This is not therapy, and a memoir is not therapy, and a fiction book is not therapy. It may be that you want to write about the traumatic events. Either don't inhabit them fully if you can't do that safely, or get help or get advice. Sorry, I don't know where that's come from.
I mean, there's also the question and your response. It was also reminding me of Paulette's slide into I don't quite know what to call it. It's not really alcoholism, but it is. She certainly abuses alcohol,
Yeah.
and it's very subtly done. Mr. Appleton Brandy, or
Yes.
certain spirit. It's kind of there. It's a presence. Mr. Appleton is a presence in her life. He's kind of there on bad days, and then he recedes again. But he becomes quite a strong presence in her life when things are very, very bad, as they are. But just before that scene you were reading, and yeah, I thought that was brilliantly done. Having had a parent who was in a similar sort of predicament. Yeah. So yeah, that's amazing advice. I need to here's my technical challenges again. I need to see where the next question is. Just a second. I know that I've had a just a sec. Oh, where am I?
Elleke, if you click on the chat.
I click on the chat. I was trying to do that. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much. So Kit, and a second question, and the first, there's actually two in sort of wrapped in one question. You write a lot about children and from children's and mothers' points of view. Actually, this picks up something that that we spoke about right at the beginning, and we were talking about My Name is Leon. So you write a lot about children and children's points of view and mothers' points of view. Why is that? Is that to do with their imagination, how they see the world?
I could not give you a coherent answer about that. I didn't even know I did it. I've got like this guy who's a super fan. He's great. He's absolutely so fascinating. And about 2 or 3 years ago, he wrote me this very long email and had picked out the themes in my work I was not aware of. And he says, there's always a tall man. Obviously, my dad, didn't realize that. There's always a grey chair. Didn't know that. And he said, you end a sentence like this, you always have that, you have these. And he was picking out these threads. And one of them was writing about the interplay. Well, he said, you write about mothering, not motherhood, but mothering. And I was absolutely fascinated by that. I think many, many writers circle things. You know, you may not be writing the same story, but there's a landscape in which you're comfortable. There's a world in which you're comfortable where you say, I know this, I can enter this landscape and know what I'm doing. And I think when you have a writer that, certainly with me, because I know it, I'm very comfortable there. I know what it is to do all different types of mothering. My mother as a birth mother, my mother as a foster carer, myself as an adoptive mother, my family as birth parents, my work with foster carers, as foster mothers, my work with birth parents. I know all about the landscape of being a mother in inverted commas and a father too. So I wasn't even aware that I did. I thought I was telling sort of these different stories, but obviously it's a little bit like when people say, no, write what you know, which I disagree with. Don't think we should write what we know. I think we should write what we know to be true. And I know the truth about that relationship and those relationships. So I write about, I feel I'm writing from a place of genuine authenticity and fascination.
And I mean, you do that. In fact, I think the reader feels comforted by the kind of the chat of a mother to a child that they're caring for, or a parent, yes, or an adult to a child they're caring for. That, do you want a biscuit? Make sure you have your cereal with lots of sugar on.
Yes.
So there's another question here that swivels a little, takes us somewhere else. Could you say something about what writing gives you personally? and relatedly, what you think fiction or memoir can offer readers and writers insofar as you feel comfortable sharing that.
Yeah. What I get from writing, I mean, it's by far apart from my children, the most important thing in my life. I just absolutely love it. I know that I have had some success with writing, but I know that I would do it without the success. It's very, very important to me. It's a way of me making sense of the world. I won't be the first writer to say that. I think James Baldwin said that much better than I can. But we write to know what we believe. I don't often know what I believe until I've had to write about it and edit it and think about it very seriously. As far as memoir goes, I about a month ago, and I can't remember why I bought this because I get sent loads and loads of books to review, and so I'm never short of a book. But I went to Waterstones and bought this book, and I say I can't remember why, and it's called Dry Stone, and it's about dry stone walling. And if anyone knows me, they'll know I am not a country girl, but I was fascinated in whatever I'd heard about this book. And I'm halfway through it, and I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning this morning because I couldn't put it down. And it's about a woman in Glasgow who had terribly traumatic childhood and discovered dry stone walling. And what has that told me about the world? It's told me that there are ways to be healed, disparate ways to be healed, weird ways to be healed. She was healed through dry stone walling. I read Amy Liptrot's memoir about going to live in the Orkneys when she was recovering from addiction, called The Outrun. And she is healed or calmed or soothed by bird watching. And I think that's what memoir gives you, this insight into the ways, the many, many different ways that people seek to feel better and to be to navigate the difficulties of life. And I think it was G.K. Chesterton said that fairy stories, I think it might not be fairy stories, but stories don't tell us that George killed the dragon or whatever. It tells us that the dragon can be killed. It tells us that the monsters can be slayed. That's what fairy stories do. That's what stories do. The redemptive end. Certainly, it's what memoir does, because most memoirs, by the very act of writing, tell us that there is an explanation, there is an answer, even if the answer isn't always good, but there's a way through. I found such a way through that I can write about it. I found such a way through that I can articulate it and make sense of it in some way. So if I could move the camera, I would show you my bookcase that is pure memoir, which I am utterly fascinated with and have been for many years. And it's also very good to read the memoir of people you don't like or whose politics you don't like. It's really, really good thing to do, because you see the human being. Everybody's a human being and deserving of understanding and respect. You may not like them. I wouldn't say everybody. Let me retract that. Not everybody's deserving of respect, but it's very good exercise in getting under the skin. And I've read memoirs of people I do not like, and it's good. And some of them are so badly written, it's a joy to see how inarticulate they are.
So that leads on perfectly to the next question, which is there room for humor in memoir?
Absolutely. I have read memoirs that have been unremittingly grim. I've still read them. I've enjoyed them in a way, but they are a tough read. And I had a very difficult childhood, I would say. But I laughed every day with my, sometimes, the sort of laughing in the dark type laughing, but there's joy, there's humor. And I wouldn't say in every life, but in many lives, there is light and there is respite and there is kindness and love and joy. And I think it's important for the reader, and if you have respect for the reader's time and the reader's experience, you will try to balance the darkness and the light. It's not always possible, but I do believe that there is scope, time, and an appropriate place for light, energy, and humour in most memoirs.
And then actually, since a kind of like a chain reaction here, because there's a related question, or certainly related to what you were just saying. Do you think that the reader then becomes, the reader, not the writer, becomes a kind of landlord? I don't know, maybe manager is, I'm supplying the word manager there. Does the reader ever become a kind of landlord, setting the terms of what feels authentic, moving, or too much?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I completely believe that once I have finished a book and it's gone into the world, it's not my business what someone takes from it. If somebody reads it and says, I didn't like that, or I don't like that, or this, someone might say, oh, Paula, best of everything's about motherhood. No, it's not. It's about race. No, it's not. It's about the found family. Oh, no, it's about immigration. It's not my business. My business is to present the book, and it's the reader's right as the purchaser of the story and the person that's invested 6 or 7 hours to say, here's my story, here's my version of the book, this is my reading of the book. And I think everyone is completely entitled to be the landlord, yes, of the story, and say that worked and that didn't, and I like that and I didn't like that. We cannot control as writers what anyone will bring to it. And of course, I'm bringing to Drystone my experience. I'm bringing to this book my experience. I'm saying, well, I'm reading it as a Black woman of 65, a Brummie, working class. So I'm bringing all my shit, and then I'm reading the book. I'm not parking that anywhere. So I have one experience of the text. I have my experience of the text, and someone with a different world, different upbringing, different values, different time of life, different, I'm sitting on a beach when I read it, or I'm sitting in a dark room when I read it. All of those things come into play. And I think give the reader the right and the opportunity and welcome their experience of what you've written.
This question, Kit, and thank you everyone for your questions. I think we have room for probably 3 more. This is the first. We're back to the perspective of the writer. When writing, Kit, about your experiences from your childhood, do you try to remain faithful to your child self perspective and understanding at that time? Or does your adult perspective inevitably shape the narration? And your thoughts on negotiating that tension between child eye view, adult eye view?
I find that a really interesting question. And when I'm talking to students, it's one that I really invite them to consider before they start writing: the knowing self. The person that knows that when my mother walked in the room, she'd interrupted my dad having an affair. Well, as a child, my mom just walked into the room, or I just walked into the room. And my preference and what I did in my memoir is I'm unknowing. I don't know I'm Irish. I don't know we're poor until that event happens. Or you can write, my father, blah, blah, blah. Previously in the day, I later found out he had had this experience. So when he came in, he was annoyed. My 7-year-old self doesn't know when my dad comes in. I don't know what happened. He came in annoyed, and I experience him as annoyed. And my preference for all memoirs is to be wherever you were at the time. Give me your understanding of that situation at the time and allow me to experience it with you in real time. So if you are 7, I would like to be 7 and know what you knew at 7. If later on, for example, I later on found out that my mother was probably bipolar, I didn't know she was bipolar. I did know that she had very weird episodes where she would smash milk bottles and wear a Davy Crockett hat down the road. And I just thought, oh, my mum's a bit strange. Then I'm 20 and I think, oh, she's probably, well, at the time it's called manic depressive. Then it's made sense. Now I would call it bipolar, and the wise eye can look back and go, oh, that was that and that was that. Well, as a reader, I don't want that. I want to know what you knew at the time so I can be there with you. And then I have the joy and the fear of those experiences and the wisdom that comes and oh, that's happened and that's happened. And I read many memoirs that say things, for example, later on, I would discover that my Auntie Pauline stole some money off my mom and that's why she was sad. Well, I don't know if I need to know that or not. Or I'd like to know that in the appropriate place. When you find out, let me find out. But it's for everyone to decide. And some memoirs I've read do it very well. And they interrupt the narrative to give you information that they didn't know at the time, because they want you to have to make sense of this activity. I don't particularly want it made sense of. I want to be there.
It is your response reminds me of a certain point of connection between fiction and memoir, because I think what you also brilliantly do in, for example, The Best Is Everything, I can think of examples in My Name Is Leon too, is kind of give us a sense of Paulette in her moment, but then also kind of the broader context. I mean, Paulette is obsessed with her lover Denton. Absolutely. I mean, years later, she still cannot criticize or condemn him.
Yes.
For his double life. Sorry, spoilers, a few spoilers. And I think that's kind of very deftly done in sort of the same way. Through certain, you leave it up to the reader. Speaking of speaking of the reader. So moving to the second last question, it might be the last, it depends. I can also wrap the two together. Well, no, I'm thinking aloud. Kit, could you tell us a little about your journey to publishing your first novel? And what were some of the challenges, key moments, or turning points? So it's a writerly question.
I started writing when I was, I don't know, maybe 43, 44. I had never wanted to be a writer. I'd never thought about being a writer. It was never on the horizon. But I had some time. My son was ill. I had to give up work, and I had some time. And I just thought, oh, it's a big piece of piss. I'll write a novel. It get published in 3 months. It'll be brilliant, obviously, because I was a great reader, and I thought I know how to tell a story. And I was shocked at how bad I was. I could not believe that I couldn't write. And it was when I started to have some respect for the craft of writing that I got to be a better writer. And that took 10 years, and it took 2 entire novels that never got published. So by the time I was 55 and I had written My Name Is Leon and had the humility to know that you are not going to pick up a pen and be Gustave Flaubert, in 10 minutes, which is what I'd certainly believed. By the time I wrote My Name Is Leon, I didn't believe it would be published at all. I thought my mom would read it, some social workers would read it maybe, my sisters would tell me I was brilliant. But I thought that would be the end of it, because I'd had these enormous and very painful rejections of my first 2 novels. Thank God, by the way, they weren't good. And I sent it to an agent, and she said, oh, I think we can get this published. And I was like, yeah, right, because I'd been there before. And she sent it off, and it went to auction, and it was, a fairy tale as far as being a writer's concerned, that I got it published, and I got a 3-book deal, and that was very easy from then on. But it was 10 years of hard work and being better, and I still try to get better. I still read books on the craft of writing. And if anything, my journey to publication, that was a long journey, taught me that, you're not because you can make beans on toast doesn't make you Michelle Roux or Michael Roux or what. You've got to learn properly, timely, spend some of your ego and spend some of your money and spend some of your time learning how to be a writer. My actual publication journey once I was published was a dream come true. I was published by Penguin very well. They were lovely. They never got me to change anything at all. They didn't say, can you tone this down? Can you make it less black? Can you make it less working class? Which I know has happened to some people, not from Penguin, but I know some people have had a horrendous journey. I consider myself extremely lucky the way that I was published and to be published so well by Penguin.
And a final question then, Kit. It's about, I mean, you can take this any way you want. It's quite a multi-layered question, but it's about your writing process. How do you begin a project? How do you sustain momentum through a long piece of work? How many chocolates do you eat?
I am a plotter. So I will, if a book, say, takes me 2 years, maybe not quite that long, at least 6 months is plotting on a spreadsheet. And I will plot and think and stare out of the window and wonder and do some character studies. And when I have got the spreadsheet done and it's color coded and it looks very complicated, I will never look at it again. Then I write the book. I don't need to look at it because I know and I understand and I know where that fits in, and I know I've got to have the scene where he looks out of the window, and I know I need to have a knife on page 7 because I'm going to need it on, in chapter 19 or whatever. And the thinking is my daydreaming. It's my bliss and my happy place where I am immersed in the story and I write it down. I say, then this happens, then that happens, but this must happen. And then my writing day would, and sometimes I don't write for a week. If I've got, I might not be feeling it, I might not have time, I might not feel like it. I will write maybe 3 hours a day creatively. If I'm editing, I could do 6 or 7 hours. But the creative writing, the max I would do would be 3 hours. And the rest of the day, I'm in this sort of miasma of wandering. Shall I use that word or that word? Shall I say sprint or ran? Or is it blue or is it indigo? I love it. I mean, it's bliss, absolute bliss.
It is a way of kind of organizing experience that does feel very, very satisfying, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I just want to refer now to our wonderful organizers behind the scenes. Are we okay to move to a close, or do you want to? I have been given instructions that yes, we are okay to move to a close. So, Kit, kind of shifting my role from interlocutor to chair. I'm sure everyone will join me in being very grateful for this amazing discussion we've had. I've learned a lot. I also just wanted to thank you for your amazing prose. It tugs. This is a very, very special skill and gift to tug at the heartstrings, but without sentimentality. We are taken into people's lives. And you have taken us into your life and into your writing craft. So thank you so very much. Do come to the Life Writing Center in person.
I will.
And let's talk more about fiction and memoir and learn and enjoy with you. So thank you so much. I'm just going to do a big clap on behalf of everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I know I give terribly long answers, but thank you so much for the questions. They were great. And it's wonderful to be part of the centre.
Thanks so much, Kit.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye now.